Welcome to another episode of Insights with Ovations. I am Aaron Ellis, your host. You can find me at aaronellisofficial.com. Today, I am joined by Amanda Banks. Now, Amanda is an entrepreneur, a consultant. She's been a sales leader. She's been a high-level athlete. She's a TEDx speaker, host, and organizer. She is best known for being the best of the best in delivering value through relationships and helping individuals and companies build authentic influence. She's also a good friend of mine. I'm honored to have you on today. Welcome, Amanda.
Aaron, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be a fun conversation, and I'm just so grateful for your time. So it'll be good.
It is. So I did a little catch up because it's been a few years, since we've known each other. We haven't really caught up in a while, and obviously things change and stuff. So a few things grabbed my attention. You talk a lot about authenticity. You talk about influence. I am curious if we could start with what your definition of authentic influence is.
Yeah, so let's break it apart, right? Like there's authenticity and then there's influence. And authenticity means that you're showing up at your raw nature regardless of the situation. So you're not showing up professionally and personally as different people. You are showing up true and authentic to yourself regardless of the situation. And living with the integrity of that, not trying to show up as somebody differently or not trying to say things because the market wants you to say them, but just showing up authentically. And then influence is how do you actually leverage your unique state of being to make a positive impact in the life of somebody else. We think about, in quotations, influencers right now, and we can thank Paris Hilton and other people like Paris Hilton for this, where you have like this negative connotation around influencer. But I believe that every single person carries influence. And, some of the greatest influences in our lives are people like my daughter. Like my daughter's 13 and she's a massive influence on me. So those two things, hopefully I define them separately, but they go hand in hand. And that's the pathway that I've taken this year, is to help support individuals and businesses build authentic influence.
So I'm curious, you basically made a pretty profound statement that a lot of people probably didn't hear the way I heard it, primarily because there is a lot of fear and doubt on people being themselves. And to paraphrase, you're like, you need being authentic is being yourself regardless of what anybody else is saying, what the market's saying. How are you helping people even bridge the gap of a mind that has constantly been looking for what's wrong and fear of losing rather than playing to win? How are you bridging that?
It's amazing what you do when you just pour belief in people and when you see them as their best selves, right? Oftentimes you mentioned fear and you mentioned challenge, you mentioned all of these things, right? And that's oftentimes caused by traumas in our childhood or whatever else it may be, right? And I think when you pour belief and you support somebody else, regardless of their past and what they've got going on currently, they break down a lot of those walls and ultimately start believing in themselves. And that was what my TEDx was about, was I believe in you, like the power of these 4 words, and how when you pour those words into somebody else, what does that actually do to unlock their potential? And, oftentimes regardless of where you're at in your life, you always need people that are supporting and believing in you. And oftentimes you need that when you're not believing in yourself, right? And so a lot of what I do is just pour belief and love and compassion and kindness into the human being that, maybe has never seen or experienced that oftentimes in their lives, which is, it's a beautiful thing.
I agree. So is the Amanda that we have here today, is that the Amanda you've always been? Like, were you brought up with these beliefs and these structures and understanding it? Or I'm guessing
what kind of podcast is this, Aaron? No. So, as a former athlete, I was a gymnast. So a lot of challenges around perfectionism and, always trying to strive to be this perfect person or score this perfect 10. And, I've had to work through that. I think that, when we talk about authenticity, it can be a messy road. We have to do some deep work just in regards to our backgrounds and some of the things that we have faced or some of the challenges that we're currently facing. We have to do some dirty work and really truly unpack, that hard question of who are you? A lot of people, when you ask that question, I speak quite often. And one of the things that I ask is like, who are you? You can't use titles, no descriptor words, like all of these things. And it's actually a very difficult question to answer.
So all the study I've done in the brain and on how people think and paradigms and stuff, you're true. Like usually when you say, who are you? People immediately go to what they do. Like that's just how we've been brought up. We've been brought up that we are our name, we are our gender, we are what we do, we are, and that's how we interact with people. So I love that you're doing that. You're not letting them use certain terminology that would just be the habitual way of explaining who they are, right? So I love this. We've never really talked about this aspect. And now I can say though, I just had a flashback of sitting in my car talking to you like a couple of years ago when I was going into the grocery store for something. I don't know what it was about, but I remember very clearly the feeling that I've always felt you were authentic. I've always felt that you had this congruency or an integrity where what you say and what you do and what you think are in alignment. And when they're not, you're one of the first people to see it, or if it's brought to you, you'll embrace it. You're not rejecting that. Now,
yeah, I mean, we're all on a learning journey, right? And none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. I say and do stupid things probably on a daily basis. Like I make mistakes, but over the past several years since that conversation, I've surrounded myself with a lot of incredible people that embrace failure. So when we think about, authenticity and building influence and, putting yourself out there, you're gonna fail. And for whatever reason, that's a negative word to a lot of people is no's or failures, or they have negative connotations, but I just see it as such a beautiful thing. It's a gift. It's a realignment onto the path of where you actually need to be. And for anybody that's tuning in, this has taken me years to get to, and a lot of, listening to speeches, listening to other subject matter experts, listening to people that, will pour into me as a human being. And as I continue to live this way, things continue to evolve, and it's a very beautiful thing.
I love that. I share my thoughts around failure and stuff with people all the time. And the other thing you brought up too, just to add this for the audience, I'm curious on your take on this, but I was brought up and my neural pathways were pretty much carved in the entertainment industry. So the word mistake registered in my brain as mistake. And you want mistakes because it allows you to assess the situation, get a little more data, and do another take and get closer towards really nailing your vision. So I'm like, give me all the mistakes I can have. You know what I mean? So I'm curious on how you've helped people work through some of those words and like that trigger their central nervous system and make them want to close, like failure and mistake and stuff like that. Is there anything you do to help them bring awareness to that and freedom to those two simply words and how they react to them?
I mean, words are incredibly powerful, right? And I think that oftentimes, so words mean something completely different to every single human being, right? So we have like the in quotations definition from Merriam-Webster, but what authenticity means to me, or what failure means to me, or what, a million different leadership. That's another good one where it's vastly different depending upon who you're talking to and where they're from in the world and where they're at in their own, unique journey. And I think that one of the things that's really powerful as a leader is to make sure that you're constantly asking, what does this word mean to you? So that you understand where there's alignment there. Because oftentimes what I find is these words mean something vastly different to people. And if you don't set the stage for where there's alignment, you're always out of alignment and you're having miscommunication. So asking as a leader, asking some of those questions, asking, what does mistake mean to you? What does failure mean to you? How do you feel about those things? It's a really powerful exercise.
Wow. Yeah, totally agree. So I pulled a couple things off of your website. I was just looking, some statements, and I'm curious on, can you qualify these statements, explain these statements? Because there's some powerful statements, but again, we're talking about words here. What does she mean when she says, one of them being effectively communicate the value you deliver to your clients? What the heck does that mean?
Okay, so value is another one of those words, right? Like what you perceive as valuable is very different than what I perceive as valuable. So some of the things that I find super valuable is like a thank you card, or just a quick note or a quick text that says, hey, I really appreciate, this conversation or what you're doing. But Aaron, you may not find that valuable at all, right? And so that's another, like when you're consistently trying to deliver value over time, especially if we're talking about maybe even long sales cycles, you have to identify what the other person defines as valuable, and then how do you actually support that need? And sometimes as leaders, we can't deliver value, but there's also value in understanding that we can't support this individual, and then maybe even bringing resources around that person.
I love that. You just brought a huge thing. Sometimes understanding that we can't help this person, support this person, and then leading them to somebody else. That's something I've worked with people on for a long time, because they want to be all things to all people, right? And a lot of times what their motive is fear-based, it's survival-based. And so they're kind of hoarding. Not that they're looking at that way. They truly come about it. They want to help people, but ultimately they're fearing that they won't be able to help people, and they're fearing that they won't be able to make ends meet. So I know that's a totally different rabbit hole that we don't necessarily need to go down today, but it popped into my head, and I kind of blurt things out as they come to me. So,
well, this is a good exercise. So as an individual, this is a good exercise to go down to. Like, sometimes I explore this with my own community and my own network. Like, I ask myself, like, how often am I communicating with this person? Is this person finding value in the relationship? Is there mutual value exchange? If I can't support this person, like, who can I connect them with? And I think, the word catalyst comes up every once in a while. I really like that word. But somebody that's a true catalyst, because people constantly reach out to them and say, hey, who do you know in your community or your network that can deliver XYZ service? Or can you do that? And, I see this pretty often, especially in like the coaching consulting space, where we feel like we can deliver everything as one person. And the reality is you're so much more powerful when you collaborate with other people. So like, I'm more apt to say, okay, like, this client could benefit from Amanda and Aaron collaborating together. What can we do to make that happen, to deliver more value to this specific client? It's a good exercise to go through.
Totally agree. So the funny thing about that is, like, the way my brain works, and it's so literal, when people ask me, like, hey, do you know how to do this? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And then I'll recommend somebody to them. Like, well, I thought you knew how to do it. I'm like, well, my way of knowing how to do it is I know that Amanda knows how to do it. She's my expert. So I recommend, like, it doesn't, to me, I don't say, well, I don't know how to, but Amanda does. It's always been in my brain. It's like, of course I know how. And part of how I know how is through the relationships I've cultivated and the network of people I've cultivated. Because I've never tried to be everything to everyone. I've always like, okay, what is my lane? Where is my gift? And how can I continue to refine that and expand that? And then what are the other things to, who can I support and who can support me? So
people that are more on the generalistic side of things or holistic side of things, I think that there's a level of transparency and integrity there, right? So as leaders, when we're collaborating or working for a prospect or a client, it's okay if you don't know exactly how to solve XYZ problem, but it's not okay to not disclose that information, I feel like. So it's like, hey, look, this is a new technology. I've launched it a couple times. Like, I would love to collaborate with you on that. And I have the resources to be able to support, our journey. Are you cool with that? But it's not okay to go out from even a marketing perspective and say, I know everything about everything and I can solve every single problem here. And then on the back end, freak out and try to figure it out. Right.
Right.
Like, I think we've all been there as entrepreneurs at some time, but I try my best to collaborate with other people and be insanely transparent about where I'm at in my journey. And that takes a level of self-awareness that I've had to develop over the past couple of years.
I love it. I love that. So we talked about this before we went live. We've talked about it indirectly, but I am huge on, I know you are big on this, about the fact that personal and professional are not separate. So how are you helping people bridge that? And before you answer, I've noticed, at least in the last decade, and let's just take COVID out of the mix, but in the last decade, in working with companies, they're more and more open to understanding that. Previously, when I was speaking in organizations over a decade, it was like totally separate. You leave your personal at home, you come in, you're professional here, but helping people understand that they're not separate, to me, has been huge for a culture that thrives and having true communication in a culture. So what are you doing in that area? What are you finding as far as when you're working with people to help them understand that? Or are you still finding resistance? Is it becoming easier? What are you finding?
I mean, I talk to a lot of people, right? So a lot of the work that I do is with smaller businesses or solopreneurs, but I talk to so many different types of organizations. And I think that, COVID did us a little justice here of bridging that gap between personal and professional, right? Like, we are all human beings. And I think that as we can show up authentic to our own specific natures and lean into the things that we actually, care about and are passionate about, we're going to do great work, So, there's this level of rigidity that I think the market is trying to break down a little bit. And it's like, how can we as human beings show up as our best selves, how can we be great leaders? But then how can we also incorporate the things that we're super passionate about? And, for me, this is something that I just do every year, and I've done it for quite some time, is like, I find something that I want to learn about. So as an individual and a leader, I find something that I want to learn about. And once a year, I dive into that. So for example, last year was SEO, right? It kept me really excited about marketing because I learned something new. So it jazzed me up about my business. This year was TV production. I took a couple of TV production courses and got in the studio, and it jazzed me up around the media side of things. So the way I would answer this, Aaron, is like, we are human beings. Like, there's not Aaron corporate and Aaron personal. There's Aaron. And if you show up and you're jazzed and you're excited and you're constantly learning, at least for me, that jazzes me up, you're going to produce a better outcome or work product. So I encourage people, like, find what you're passionate about. If your company doesn't offer that, like if it's dog walking or whatever it may be, like, incorporate that into your life, because it's going to produce a better outcome. And if your organization will support you through that, great, even better. Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question. There's a spin-off on that question too that just came to mind. So you're very well spoken. You obviously know what you're talking about. What I mean by know is you're not someone who's just like, it's not lip service. I know you know what you're talking about. I know you live what you're talking about, right? I trust you in the sense that I feel the trust and the energetic exchange that you have worked a lot on yourself. Now, when we talk about personal and professional, is that equating to a smooth, articulate, ever-evolving, growing relationship with a 13-year-old daughter?
Of course. Like, her and my husband are like, and my mother, like, they're my everything. And I learn she is an incredible leader. Obviously, she's received a lot of coaching in her life, but she's an athlete as well. And she's an incredible leader. And I think that when you have children, they expose things in you that you really need to work on. And they expose, some things like patience and all of the things. And it gives you the opportunity to practice those things and learn those things through the lens of a child. And, she's just a natural born leader. She's a goalkeeper in soccer. Like, she's incredible when it comes to leadership. So a lot of the leadership lessons, to your point, I have learned through the lens of her, and I continue to learn through the lens of her.
I love that. I absolutely love that answer. That totally makes sense. I mean, I've been very active in my kids' lives, and, making sure that I'm not clipping their wings, and I'm always cultivating their creativity and their imagination and stuff. And so it sounds like you're very involved, and it's not a traditional 13-year-old teenage daughter kind of relationship. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I homeschooled her. Like, the whole story in entrepreneurs, I homeschooled her for a year. And I think that when you homeschool, your children, like, you have to be a parent, you have to be a best friend, you have to be, entertainment and all of the things. And, we luckily had the opportunity to do that, and we, developed this incredible relationship. And so I'm very grateful for that.
Very cool. Two more things I want to cover if I can in the last little bit of time we have. One, we're coming into a part of the year where Earth Day is going to be happening, where a lot of organizations are focusing on sustainability. Yep. Now, I have a feeling that you will have insights into sustainability, like I have insights into sustainability, that are not necessarily the traditional talk tracks and the traditional thoughts that people are having. I am extremely big on bringing in sustainability to teams, sustainability to leadership, sustainability to customer relations, right? Not necessarily the traditional terminology around sustainability. How do you feel sustainability applies towards authenticity and to companies becoming authentic?
I want to know from your perspective, what do you mean by that? So, like, when you're talking about sustainability within teams, like, what does that mean to you?
I'm talking about a team, an organization that will continue to thrive, continue to expand, and continue to move through iterations of that. So from the top down, they're seeking to help the organization thrive. They're coming into, like, you could even talk about how businesses started. When I do talks on business to entrepreneurs and startup founders, I'm like, if you're starting a business to make money, you're going to fail. You need to be starting a business for an internal drive to help other people thrive. What are you bringing to the market to expand, thrive, not survival? And with that to me completely foundationally goes across the business on how you sustain a business, not just status quo and survival, but sustain the ever evolving, thriving aspects of a culture of everything in a company.
Yeah. So to that point, so sustainability around authenticity, like it's a journey, right? So like you developing your true authentic nature and then helping other people do the same thing, like everybody, it's a journey. It's a continuous cycle, a continuous journey, right? And when I think about my time in sports, like the repetitions matter. You're not going to get, the double back if you can't do a backflip. You're not going to get a round off if you can't do a cartwheel. That takes practice, it takes discipline, it takes continuous effort and focus. And so when I think about sustainability around authenticity, it's almost like it's a continuous practice, right? And like my definition of authenticity has changed over the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because I'm continuing to push the envelope on what does that mean to me? How do I go about continuing to build personally, spiritually, all of the things, right, that make me unique to who I am. And when I see other people, like it's a journey. If you're only going to be, in quotations, authentic from a marketing perspective, like I can find it very, very quickly because I'm like, well, what are you doing to support that effort? Like, is it a journey or is it a destination? This is not a destination. So, as leaders, it's the same thing as leadership to me. Like we continuously evolve as human beings, or should. Well, we're going to continuously evolve as authentic leaders or heart-centered leaders or whatever terminology you want to use. So I hope that was in alignment with the question there. But
yeah,
I
figured that's where you were going to go with it. And I think it's important that narrative gets out there. So I'm thank you for sharing that, because I think it's extremely important for people to start looking at these topics, these things that are important to the world and to the sustainability of the world from a different perspective, rather than just the way that they have been kind of coined and pushed out there. So we're at time. We're a little bit over, which I kind of knew we were going to do, but I know we both have things to do. But is there final thing you want to share with the audience today before we say goodbye?
No, I would just say, I'm a resource. So there's a slogan that I use with everything that I do. And I'll leave the audience with this. Just please remember, like your ideas matter, your voice matters, and you matter. So please just go out there and freaking crush it and be authentically yourself.
I love that. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. And everybody, this has been another episode of Insights at Ovations. I recommend, as always, go back and listen to this whole thing. It's 20 minutes long. There's a lot of congruency. There's a lot of authenticity in the talk that we have here. Some of you might think, what the heck were they talking about? Well, go back and you'll be able to connect the dots and see the through line through everything, like I have and like Amanda has. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.